Could it be that there's actually a version of you beneath your trauma that didn't get to actualize because it was distracted by the trauma, right? We all get traumatized. No child comes out of childhood without marring, without trauma, without scathing, right? That's just the reality of it. But what if at this level of our lives, right, being consciously aware enough, right, as an adult, we can actually dive deeper, we can dig deeper, we can see ourselves more fully beneath the trauma, beneath all the things that traumatized us. And we can actually see that maybe we have been running on autopilot to a very large extent and just simply repeating patterns based on the trauma. I mean, this goes beyond repetition compulsion. Repetition compulsion is a real thing, by the way. Repeating patterns that are comfortable and familiar based in childhood trauma. That's its own thing. Absolutely. Now, is it possible then that because we were traumatized as children, we were also distracted from something? I'm not claiming any of this is fact or truth, but I am exploring something that I think is very fascinating, right? Maybe you played a role when you were younger in survival, and you played it for survival. You played it to get love, to get validation, to get approval, right? But that actually distracted you from some part of yourself that wanted to actualize, that wanted to manifest. And back then, maybe you really couldn't see it or look it in its eyes and understand what it was because you were, younger. You lacked a necessary level of conscious awareness to be able to do that. So what if that is actually the case, right? And what if there is what if there was something there that you really couldn't understand because you didn't have what you have now, but now you can dig deeper and you can look at it, right? There are things in my life that are happening now that I never previously would have even imagined, would have even fathomed, right? And it's just fascinating to see how I can actualize as a person and actualize interests that back then I didn't even come close to thinking about. And I really appreciate that about being able to dig and dive deep into myself and understand what it is that has been there. And I just didn't even know it. I'm very fascinated by this. Um, Trauma, especially living in survival, has a tendency to distract us from ourselves, right? There are often times that people end up being so traumatized by something, they end up being sucked so far into survival that they're actually distracted from themselves. They're distracted from their gifts. They're distracted from their capacities. They're distracted from maybe their true nature. Survival is not really who we are. It's more so masks that we wear. And a lot of us end up in survival because we are raised in unhealthy environments, right? Um, Let me make this very clear. There's a difference between being raised in an environment that is safe and healthy and secure, and instead being raised in an environment that is unsafe, unhealthy, and insecure, right? The latter is survival. The latter is where the child learns to wear the mask and do things that a child in a healthy childhood would not have to do. These are adaptations, these are survival tactics, right? And don't get me wrong, again, let me make this very clear. Every childhood has uh, brings with it for the child some level of marring, some level of trauma, some level of scathing. But the reality of the matter is very simple. And that's what I'm saying here, which is maybe there is a version of every person beneath the trauma that doesn't always get actualized and manifested because they're distracted by the role that they took on in early childhood to survive, which is why it's called survival. So I'm very fascinated by this, and the reason why I look at it is because I see these kinds of things happening in my own life. I see things manifesting and actualizing for me that I wouldn't have previously seen. Like, for the longest time, I carried beliefs about myself, things that I was capable of, things that I wasn't capable of, limitations, all these different things, right? And the more I look at it, the more I'm like, oh, wait a second. Hmm. These are just beliefs. These are just roles. These are just masks, right? So what's underneath that then? There's probably something underneath that. Let's explore it. Let's understand it. Let's see what it actually means. And that is very interesting territory because you might even find yourself doing things that you previously wouldn't have even fathomed. Let me make this very clear because this is a really cool thing to look at. When you dissolve beliefs and you realize that they're just beliefs and you realize that these beliefs have been running 99.99% of your life, right? You'll really start to take a step back and you'll really start to be like, whoa, am I actually this person? Do I actually believe these things? Right? For instance, you might live decades of your life in what people would call poverty, right? Scarcity, financially, looking specifically at finances, right? Um, and that might all just be based on a belief. You've lived your entire life believing that money is the root of all evil. That's going to affect the flow of money into your life, right? Like, if you believe that money is the root of all evil, money is going to stay at bay out of your life. If you believe that love is hard to come by, love is going to stay at bay all of your life. Um, Beliefs shape our reality. Whatever we believe to be true about life and about reality, we experience. That's just the reality of it, right? Life always mirrors to us what it is that we're believing, right? Um, Throughout my entire life, I've believed that I can't trust people. I know why. I'm not going to get into it, but yeah, I have experienced relationships where I can't trust people. Life has mirrored to me my beliefs. That's just the reality of it, right? So, what if then you believe about yourself that you're just meant to play this or that role, and it's based in survival? It's based in an unsafe childhood, an insecure childhood, an unhealthy childhood, and you've just worn these masks your entire life to survive, right? And you believe that that's what life is, that's what reality is, right? Well, you're just going to continue wearing that mask. You're going to continue playing that role. And let me make this very clear when I say this because this needs to be understood. That is very surface level. There is more to life than that. There is. It requires digging, it requires conscious awareness, self awareness. It requires understanding that you probably played a role or multiple roles your entire life, right? And it has blocked you from really seeing deeper parts of yourself that you probably didn't know were there. And that's where the magic lies. The magic lies in going down deep into that stuff. Because whatever it is that you go into, you dissolve, right? If you if you have, I don't know, let's say repetition compulsion in an area of your life where like you're overly responsible, maybe you were parentified or something, right? If you go into that, you dissolve it. I'm talking about like doing the work of fixing the well rather than trying to patch the faucet with a filter, right? That filter is going to fall off after a certain amount of time. That filter is going to get fucked up after a certain amount of time. The real work is going into the well and really doing the deep work, right? The real work of changing your life is seeing yourself, like actually seeing yourself, not trying to put a band-aid on your fucking defense mechanisms, not trying to think this instead of that. No, The thoughts that are there for a fucking reason. Diving into the well, going underneath the fucking, going into the trauma and then underneath it is the key. That is the ticket out. That shows you that there's far more to you than you've previously seen.